Joining the NFL as an expansion team is hard, whereas every other team has some kind of structure in place, not to mention a roster of players. Expansion teams are starting completely from scratch. Sure, you get to pick the barnacles from the bottom of those rosters, and you're given some benefits in the NFL draft, but at the very least, that first season is gonna be a rough ride. After a 5-year period though, it could be expected that the expansion franchise has fully integrated itself within the NFL ecosystem, making that a good place to start passing judgment. Since the beginning of the Super Bowl era, 10 expansion franchises have joined the NFL, and today we're going to rank how those teams have performed within their first 5 seasons, from worst to best. And we will be doing that by using C-Score, a metric created by this channel in order to evaluate every single NFL team of the Super Bowl era beyond just looking at its record. For a deeper explanation of C-Score, be sure to check out the description of this video. All we're doing is taking the C-Score for each of these franchises during those first 5 seasons and adding them up. The higher that total, the higher they rank. Now, even though the NFL designates them as such, we will not be treating the 1996 Baltimore Ravens as an expansion team, because they continued the operations of the Cleveland Browns. Likewise, even though the NFL does not treat the 1999 Browns as an expansion team in the literal sense, we will be, because the organization was starting from scratch. Thank you for joining us today. Let's take a look and see how these franchises line up. Just a few seasons after the NFL and the AFL merged in 1970, expansion was on the horizon. This franchise joined the league in 1976, but they did not have a good time of things. Ranking at the bottom of this list are the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and it was that first season in 1976 that did the most damage, ranking out as the single worst in the entire Super Bowl era. Thanks to the defense, things got much better in 1977, but they were still quite terrible. Things started turning around in 1978, and the momentum from that season got the Bucs into the playoffs as NFC Central champions in 1979. They even made it to the NFC Championship game, even though they carried a negative C-score. They dropped off in 1980, but interestingly, they achieved their one and only tie in franchise history. Yes, ties aren't common, but they have played 775 regular season games. Even though they showed signs of life, that first season and their terrible ownership was too much to overcome. Their total C-score in their first 5 seasons of existence languishes at negative 108.362. When the Super Bowl era began, the NFL had 14 teams. With that 1966 season, they added a 15th, giving the city of Atlanta their second professional sports franchise in the same year. At number 9 are the Atlanta Falcons. While the Atlanta Braves were 8 games over 500 in 1966, their 14th consecutive winning season going back to their days in Milwaukee, the Falcons were terrible, and they had the C-score to prove it. They officially improved in 1967, the equivalent of being closer to finishing a novel by reading one sentence on page 3. 1968, more of the same, giving Atlanta 3 consecutive seasons of worse than negative 30 in C-score, a feat only matched by the truly terrible St. Louis Rams from 2007 to 2009. But then, a miracle. They didn't land a winning record, but their greatly improved play against a difficult schedule brought them a positive C-score for the first time. They couldn't maintain that after the merger, but these last 2 seasons just saved them from falling behind the Buccaneers, landing them a first 5 C-score of negative 107.88. Adding the Falcons in 1966 left the NFL with an odd number of teams. They quickly took care of that with the addition of our number 8 team the very next season, the New Orleans Saints. The quickest way to sum up their first season? They traded 3 draft picks, including number 1 overall and a star center, for a backup quarterback who lost his job before the end of the season and was gone from the team by 1968. Looking at these two C-scores, it's remarkable the Saints weren't even worse. They stayed about the same in 1969, but after the merger, they found themselves right back in the doldrums. They found their way to 2 ties in 1971, meaning they only lost 8 games that season, and they actually pulled themselves out of the double-digit negatives in C-score. Because they avoided any truly dreadful seasons, they were able to keep a reasonable distance from the Bucs and the Falcons, but it's still a pretty grim picture. Dust off those paper bags, New Orleans. Your first 5 seasons in the league brought forth a C-score of negative 94.002. We've got another connection to the Falcons here. As the NFL added one team to its ranks in 1966, so too did the AFL when they were joined by the Miami Dolphins, our number 7 team. While Miami theoretically had it easier by joining the weaker league, their first season still didn't go all that well. And even though they improved from 3 wins to 4 in 1967, they still saw a moderate drop in their C-score. They had started to collect some talent though, and got a nice jump of double digits come 1968. It seemed like they were primed for even more improvement during the final season of AFL play in 1969. But that never came to pass. Joining the NFL as part of the merger in 1970 didn't offer them a whole lot of hope, or so it seemed. They hired Don Shula as head coach, immediately turning things around, earning a winning record, a wild card, and their first ever positive C-score. This proved the gateway for 3 straight Super Bowl appearances, 2 straight Super Bowl wins, and an undefeated season. But their first 5 seasons cannot be erased, settling in at negative 85.985. The NFL's most recent expansion team just missed joining the top half of the countdown. Coming in at number 6 are the Houston Texans. Once again faced with an odd number of teams in the league, and with the city of Los Angeles unsurprisingly unable to get their act together, the NFL dialed up the 8-3-2, and the Texans were born. Their inaugural game in 2002 was thrilling, defeating their in-state rival Dallas Cowboys. But the season as a whole was far from spectacular. 2003 saw some improvement, but a bad December did them in. The promise was there though, and the Texans had themselves a fine 2004 season and looked primed for a jump to playoff contention. Instead, they fell apart in 2005 to the point that they were even worse than their inaugural season. They bounced back somewhat in 2006, but were still decidedly below average. In the end, Houston went into the negatives in all 5 seasons, but avoided anything too horrific and had one reasonably solid season. But it was still a sad sight, with their C-score totaling negative 82.158. Call it a rebirth, call it a reactivation, call it what you will. We'll just call them our number 5 entry for the time being, the Cleveland Browns. According to NFL lore, the Browns franchise simply went into hibernation for 3 years before re-entering the league. They're not an expansion team, y'all, but we're still going to give them an expansion draft because, you know, they're starting completely from scratch. Their 1990 season was a tough watch, but even though they won an extra game in 2000, they were even worse by C-score. In both seasons, the league curiously assigned Cleveland a Week 17 bye, making them play 16 consecutive weeks. Kinda harsh. 2001 was a big turnaround that led to bigger and better things in 2002, where the Browns landed a winning record and a wildcard berth. And they had that wildcard game won as well before letting it slip away. They were right back to their losing ways though in 2003. Things were looking especially dire after those first 2 seasons, but Cleveland was able to moderate somewhat. Not enough to avoid a bad first 5 score of negative 82.056. They entered the league at the same time as the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but they didn't endure quite the same struggle. At number 4, we have the Seattle Seahawks. Now, that first season was pretty grisly, especially defensively. But after settling in as a permanent member of the AFC, they started to show some life in 1977. By season 3, they had a winning record, although their defensive quality still lagged well behind their offensive counterpart, leaving them ever so slightly in the negatives of C-score. They put up the same 9-7 record in 1979, but a better overall performance against a significantly tougher schedule not only proved their worth, but it took their C-score above 0 for the first time. Seemingly on the precipice of a true breakout, they came crashing back to earth in 1980. Were we to ignore 1976, the Seahawks would be looking pretty good. But of course we can't do that. While they were far and away more successful than the Buccaneers, and while they performed well in a relative sense, their C-score is still pretty darn low at negative 62.169. Why did both the NFL and the AFL leave themselves with an odd number of teams so many times? I mean, it's weird. Every week had someone on bye when bye weeks weren't otherwise a thing. Anyway, the AFL had 9 teams for 2 seasons before adding our number 3 entry, the Cincinnati Bengals. Their 1968 C-score isn't great in a vacuum, but when you consider their expansion status, it was pretty good. In year 2, the final season of the AFL, they got even better while still staying in the negative double digits. The move to the NFL in 1970 saw many AFL teams regress, but not the Bengals. They won the AFC Central, and even though it wasn't a stellar playoff field, Cincinnati made it in. A bad run, but not a bad team, followed in 1971, and proof of that came to light in 1972. Even though they didn't make the playoffs, they put up the first double-digit positive C-score that we've seen to this point. I mean, they barely made it, but they did make it. From 69 to 72, the Bengals were essentially average, which is pretty impressive for an expansion franchise. Their total C-score isn't bad at all, coming in at negative 20.021. 2 seasons earlier, the various forms of free agency that previously existed in the NFL amalgamated into the unrestricted free agency system that more or less is identical to what we know today. This expansion franchise at number 2, the Carolina Panthers, were able to take advantage of that. Their debut season in 1995 was an all-time best, ending the year at 7-9, including a victory on the field of the defending Super Bowl champions. Their C-score is also a first-year best. Then, in just their second season of existence, they exploded to 12-4, won the NFC West, and eliminated that season's defending Super Bowl champion to make it to the NFC title game. They relied heavily on free agency to do this though, and without a solid core of young players, they were due to drop off. It happened rather quickly though, and they dropped right back to their season 1 level in 1997. 98 and 99 brought 2 more negative C-scores, but nothing too out of hand. Carolina had 1 glorious season and never dipped into the negative double digits during their first 5 seasons, putting forth an admirable combined C-score of negative 8.204. Admirable, but not the best. The Jacksonville Jaguars are actually able to rank number 1 in something positive. That must be the sound of angels singing. Coming into the league in the same season as the Panthers, Jacksonville was presented the same opportunities in free agency, but chose not to take the same path. Instead, they went bargain hunting, made some shrewd trades, and drafted well, both in the 95 expansion draft and in the various college drafts. That left them vulnerable in season 1, and they did take it on the chin. They showed signs of improvement in 1996 before a wild end to the season got them into the playoffs. They then proceeded to shock the world by going on a run that led them to the AFC Championship game in the same season where their expansion brethren Carolina Panthers did so as well. But because the Jags had developed a roster rather than snagging a bunch of veterans, they had a foundation with which to move forward. They were excellent as division champions in 1997. They were very good as division champions in 1998. Then they were phenomenal as division champions once again in 1999, making it to the AFC Championship game as solid favorites to make it to the Super Bowl. They were 15-0 this season when they didn't play the Tennessee Titans, but they were 0-3 when they did, and unfortunately for them, Tennessee was their opponent in that title game. Despite that lowly first season, the Jaguars were sublime over the next 4, and they are a model for how to build a team from scratch. While everybody else was in the negative, Jacksonville proudly strides forward to lead the way with their positive first 5 C-score of 22.408. Looking at the top 10 as a whole shows us an obvious tier of really bad from numbers 10 through 5. It's worth pointing out that gap between the Texans and the Browns. It is minuscule at just over 1/10 of a point over a 5-year period. Each entry in the top 4 kinda take up their own individual tiers. Seattle is bad, but not terrible. Cincinnati is highly respectable. Carolina is downright good, and Jacksonville is excellent. In fact, across the entire NFL during their first 5 seasons, they ranked 11th overall in total C-score. From 96 to 99, they were 5th overall. 7 of these 10 franchises have made it to a Super Bowl at some point. 6 have made it more than once, while 4 have won it. They have a combined 6 Lombardi trophies from 18 total appearances. But curiously, these 10 teams have never once produced a Super Bowl matchup. Thank you so much for getting this far into the video. Please take a single moment to give it a like. It really helps out the channel. Be sure to share it as well. If you've yet to do so, hit that subscribe button and ding that notification bell so you don't miss out on any of our future releases. Let me know what you think about all of this. I don't think anyone would be surprised that the Panthers and the Jaguars took the top 2 spots, but did you think that the Panthers had a chance at claiming number 1? Maybe the Bengals at number 3 were a surprise. Were the Falcons a lot closer to the Buccaneers than maybe you expected? Sound off on these topics or anything else you may have on your mind right down there in the comments section. Thank you once again for joining us today, and until next time, I hope you have an awesome day.